Syed Abul Maududi, the standard bearer of Islam's ascendancy. Writer and researcher Naim Ahmad Baloch. When nations fall from the heights of glory to the depths of decline, their collective ego is often grievously wounded. In the aftermath of such defeat, that ego becomes an obstacle to acknowledging their own shortcomings. At times, they take refuge in the vicissitudes of history. At others, they seek consolation in allegations of conspiracies devised by outsiders. Sometimes, they nostalgically recall a golden past, and sometimes, they dream of the destruction of their enemies through curses and imprecations. Yet, among those swept along by this general disposition, very few possess the resolve to confront reality, struggle against adverse circumstances, and lay the foundations for meaningful change. Such capable, reflective, and intellectually awakened individuals investigate the underlying causes of decline, explore possible avenues of reform, and formulate practical programs of action before stepping into the arena of struggle. One such figure was Maulana Syed Abul Maududi. May God have mercy upon him. He was born on 25th September 1903 in Aurangabad, then part of the princely state of Hyderabad, Deccan. His father, Syed Ahmed Hassan Maududi, was a learned man of deep religious devotion and impeccable moral reputation. By profession, he was a lawyer. Later, however, he abandoned legal practice and withdrew into a life of seclusion. His mother, Quraishiyat Begum, was likewise a deeply religious woman. Syed Maududi had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and he was the youngest among his brothers. His lineage is traced to Khwaja Sayyid Qutbuddin Maudud Chishti, a revered saint of the Chishti Sufi order, from whom the family name Maududi is derived. It is said that his ancestors migrated from Chisht in Afghanistan to India during the reign of Sultan Sikandar Lodi. They initially settled in Haryana and later moved to Delhi. On his mother's side, his ancestors were descended from Turkic soldiers, including Mirza Atlaq, who came to India from Transoxiana during the reign of Emperor Aurangzeb. His maternal grandfather, Mirza Qurban Ali Beg Khan Salik, was a poet and man of letters from Delhi and was counted among the close friends of Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib. Early education and formation. Maulana Maududi's temperament differed markedly from that of many Indians of his time. He possessed an innate disposition of independence and freedom of spirit. One possible reason for this may have been the environment of Hyderabad, which was a semi-autonomous princely state governed by the Muslim ruler Mir Osman Ali Khan. Even after its separation from the Mughal Empire, the state had never come under direct British domination. Consequently, the Muslims of Hyderabad remained comparatively free from the mentality of subjugation. The financial condition of the state was such that its ruler was considered among the wealthiest men in the world. Hyderabad was also the largest, most prosperous, and most significant princely state in the Indian subcontinent. Until the age of 9, Maulana Maududi's education and upbringing were supervised by his father and by teachers appointed by him. Since his father wished him to become a religious scholar, he was taught Arabic, Persian, Islamic jurisprudence, and Hadith. Alongside these disciplines, he also studied logic. The young Maududi possessed extraordinary intellectual ability. At merely 11 years of age, he translated the celebrated work Al-Mar'a Al-Jadida, The New Woman, by the Egyptian author Qasim Amin from Arabic into Urdu. Later, he also worked through approximately 3,500 pages of Mullah Sadra's philosophical work Al-Asfar. It is sometimes suggested that Mullah Sadra's work contributed to certain Shi'i influences in Maulana Maududi's intellectual formation. Educational journey. At the age of 11, he was admitted directly into the 8th grade at Madrasa Fawqaniya Mashriqiya in Aurangabad. The institution had been established by Shibli Nomani with the objective of harmonizing the classical religious sciences with modern science and philosophy. It was here that Maulana developed a deep interest in philosophy, mathematics, physics, and chemistry. He later enrolled in a traditional Darul Ulum in Hyderabad. During this period, however, his father suffered a severe paralytic stroke. The family moved to Bhopal, where his father passed away, leaving them without financial support. This tragic event compelled Maulana Maududi to discontinue his formal education. At the age of only 16, he traveled to Delhi, where he began attempting to establish himself in professional journalism. By the age of 17, he had been appointed editor of the weekly journal Taj. Alongside his journalistic pursuits, he continued his study of modern disciplines, particularly Western philosophy, sociology, and history. He also learned English and German in order to read European thinkers in their original languages. After 5 years of sustained and intensive study, he reached the conclusion that Muslim scholars had never seriously examined the causes behind Europe's intellectual and material advancement. It was during this period that he also underwent a phase of skepticism. In an article written about himself, he stated, "When I completed my college education, I was 16 or 17 years old. Thereafter, I began what may be called indiscriminate reading. Whatever I came across, I read. I read books of every kind, on every subject, and under every heading. This unstructured reading produced an extremely dangerous result. My faith in God and the hereafter gradually began to disappear. Doubt and skepticism undermined the foundations of faith and certainty. I could not comprehend the existence of God. All religious beliefs appeared futile and irrational to me." This continued for approximately 1.5 years. However, this state of uncertainty and skepticism did not endure for long. I had attained considerable mastery of Arabic, and so I began to study the Quran and Hadith directly. Gradually, their truths and insights began to unfold before me, and the haze of uncertainty slowly disappeared. I had also studied the sacred scriptures of other religions. Through a comparative study of religions, I attained a distinct form of intellectual reassurance. In reality, it was then that I accepted Islam consciously and with understanding. I acquired complete certainty regarding its truthfulness. The works of Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim, and Shah Waliullah played an important role in strengthening and stabilizing my mind. He also studied major European thinkers, including Fichte, Hegel, Kant, Comte, Mill, Turgot, Adam Smith, Malthus, Rousseau, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Darwin, Goethe, and Herder. Reflecting upon this extensive intellectual engagement, he wrote, "The scholarly efforts of Muslims remained less than 1% of those of Europe." Alongside his engagement with Western philosophy, Maulana Maududi resumed an independent and serious study of the works of Muslim scholars. Under the influence of certain religious scholars, he also studied philosophical theology and subjects associated with the Dars-e-Nizami curriculum. He acquired formal certificates in religious learning as well, yet he was never willing to describe himself as an alim in the conventional sense. In his view, many traditional scholars had become detached from the intellectual and historical realities of their age. Maulana Maududi would often say, "I am a man of the middle class. I have learned through both the traditional and modern systems, and I have come to realize that truth is not the exclusive inheritance of any single school." Journalism, intellectual development, and the beginning of Tarjuman al-Quran. Amid the intellectual and political turbulence of early 20th century India, the young Maududi emerged within Muslim circles as a writer of exceptional intellectual awareness and remarkable maturity of thought. This was the era of the First World War. Even at a young age, Maulana Maududi adopted the pen as his principal means of expression. His practical career in journalism began in 1918 with Medina, a well-known religious and literary journal published from Bijnor. It was there that his writing abilities became increasingly evident, and within only a few years, he advanced from contributing articles to working at the editorial level. In 1920, he became associated with the tri-weekly newspaper Al-Jamiyat, the official organ of Jamiat Ulama-e-Hind. He soon became its sub-editor and later its editor. This was the period in which his intellectual depth, political insight, and religious temperament began to make a serious impression upon influential and discerning circles. He subsequently became associated with Taj, published from Jabalpur. Although this association was brief, it added further depth to Maulana Maududi intellectual development. Thereafter, for some time, he also contributed to political journals such as Muslim of Delhi. During these years, his name came to be recognized in the Muslim journalism of the subcontinent as that of a credible, serious, and rigorously reasoned voice. It was also during this period that an event occurred which would determine a major direction in his future life. This was the time of his association with the daily Al-Jamiyat. He later described the incident in the following words. In the closing days of December 1926, Swami Shraddhanand, the founder of the Shudi movement, was killed by a Muslim. This produced an uproar among the enemies of Islam, who unleashed a storm of accusations against Muslims and Islamic teachings. My national sentiment stirred me to respond to their calumnies and abusive attacks. During those days, Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar used to deliver the Friday sermon at the Jami Mosque in Delhi. I attended his address every Friday with regularity. In one such sermon, Maulana observed that there was an urgent need for some servant of God to write a comprehensive book on the correct Islamic conception of jihad, one that would offer reasoned answers to the common objections and accusations raised against it. While he was still speaking, I resolved that I would write a book on the subject of jihad. Thus, this work began with a feeling of national sentiment, but as it developed, that sentiment became absorbed within the wider horizons of Islam. The young Maududi initially believed that a detailed essay would suffice for this purpose. Accordingly, he began publishing his writing in installments in the tri-weekly newspaper with which he was associated. The first installment appeared on February 2nd, 1927. He soon realized, however, that the subject demanded a full-length book. After publishing 26 installments, he discontinued the series in the newspaper. In 1930, the first edition of the work was published under the title Al-Jihad fil Islam. Commenting on the book, Allama Muhammad Iqbal reportedly observed, "It is among the finest works on Islam's conception of jihad and its law of peace and war. I would advise every educated person to study it." This book played a central role in laying the foundations for Maulana Maududi's distinctive interpretation of religion. Extending to approximately 550 pages, it was completed in less than 3 years when he was only 23 years old. He did not take leave from his professional responsibilities in order to write it. Rather, he composed it alongside his editorial duties at Al-Jamiyat. In this work, Maulana Maududi presented the Muslim case concerning jihad through an entirely new framework and with a fresh body of arguments. Prior to this, the prevalent understanding of jihad among many Muslim scholars may be summarized through a passage found in Ibn Rushd's Bidayat al-Mujtahid. It states, in substance, Muslim scholars are agreed that, with the exception of Quraysh, the people of the book, and Arab Christians, the purpose of fighting the people of the book is either to bring them into Islam or to collect jizya from them. This is based on verse 29 of Surah Al-Tawbah. With regard to polytheists, Imam al-Shafi held that all polytheists were to be killed, whether they were elderly persons, monks, women, or persons with disabilities. Other jurists maintained, however, that only fighting women were to be killed, while children, the elderly, persons with disabilities, and monks were not to be killed. This position was based on verse 5 of Surah Al-Tawbah and the mutually authenticated hadith, "I have been commanded to fight the people until they testify that there is no God but Allah." Within the intellectual history of Muslims, there had been little disagreement over the position that fighting polytheists and fighting the people of the book was connected with their disbelief, namely, their rejection of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the messenger of God. According to this traditional formulation, such warfare would continue until they became subordinate to Muslim authority through the payment of jizya. In contrast to these juridical formulations and what was widely regarded as the established position, Maulana Maududi advanced the following interpretation of jihad. Jihad, he argued, is of two kinds: defensive jihad and reformative jihad. No one, he maintained, could reasonably object to defensive war. The principal objection directed against Islam, however, concerned offensive jihad. Maulana Maududi therefore interpreted the command to kill the polytheists in verse 5 of Surah Al-Tawbah as a punishment for the violation of treaties. He also adopted a particular interpretive position regarding verse 29, which addresses the people of the book. According to him, the purpose of this command was the elimination of fitna. In his interpretation, fitna did not simply mean a refusal to accept Islam, nor merely armed opposition. Rather, it referred to oppression, persecution, the forcible imposition of beliefs upon others, and preventing people from practicing their religion freely. Maulana Maududi wrote this book during an age in which powerful European nations had subjugated scores of weaker peoples, and the world continued, as it so often had, to operate according to the principle that might makes right. Through his forceful pen, he characterized the colonial project of European powers as a system of oppression, exploitation, and domination over weaker nations. Conversely, he presented the military expansions of Muslims as a movement directed towards the removal of oppression, persecution, and disorder, and towards the establishment of societies founded upon peace and security. In support of this argument, he assembled an extensive range of evidence and reasoning, making the work deeply persuasive for many readers. In the political and intellectual circumstances of 1930, such a book undoubtedly contributed to the ideological confidence of Muslims and strengthened their trust in their historical legacy. For the first time, a powerful Muslim narrative appeared which argued, with considerable force, that Islam sought to transform the world into a universal community founded upon justice, equality, and the eradication of oppression. At the same time, this vision did not call for the destruction of anyone's beliefs or religious convictions. Its tolerance and forbearance, it was argued, were such that every individual could remain committed to his or her own religion and worldview. Political authority, however, would rest exclusively with Muslims because this office had been granted to them by God. They had been designated Khair al-Ummah, the best community or the finest leadership. Non-Muslims, in return for protection, would pay a tax to the Muslim state in the form of jizya. This, it was argued, should not be regarded as objectionable, since just as Muslims pay zakah, non-Muslims would pay jizya. Moreover, Muslims had not assigned this status to themselves. Rather, it had been bestowed upon them by God Almighty. Therefore, it was maintained no one had the authority to challenge it. This conception of jihad embodied an entirely new interpretation of Islam and a new philosophy of collective life. On the surface, it constituted a highly logical and carefully argued narrative. Building upon this philosophical foundation, Maulana Maududi came to view Islam as a comprehensive system and offered an entirely new interpretation of the religion. This interpretation may be summarized in a single sentence. The ultimate objective of Islam is to establish divine justice and equity across the world, what he termed Hakimiyat-i Ilahiyya, or the sovereignty and governance of God. Thus, at merely 23 years of age, Maulana Maududi produced, after almost 3 years of research, a work that offered Muslims throughout the world a powerful and markedly new intellectual narrative. The book became, in effect, the foundation of his entire religious thought. A second reason for the book's widespread reception was that it provided a forceful response to accusations leveled against Muslims. Maulana Maududi did not present it as the position of a particular school of thought. Rather, he presented it as an expression of the intellectual and moral conscience of the Muslim community as a whole. Consequently, it achieved extensive popularity and acceptance. A third reason for its appeal was that it had been written before the establishment of the United Nations. At that time, the world had not yet become familiar with a global vision that spoke of liberating humanity from the political domination and economic exploitation of powerful nations, and of building prosperous societies upon the principles of justice and equality. Instead, international affairs largely continued to be governed by the old maxim, the strong prevail and the weak submit. The beginning of Tarjuman al-Quran, the foundation of an intellectual revolution. The turbulent political climate of Delhi, together with sustained intellectual and physical exertion, had severely affected Maulana Maududi's health. It was during this period, in 1932, that he received an invitation from Darul Islam, a distinguished scholarly institution in Hyderabad, Deccan, functioning under the patronage of Hyderabad's semi-autonomous Osmani government. The institution was regarded as an important center for the preservation, development, and dissemination of Islamic learning. Seeking recovery, intellectual concentration, and an environment conducive to scholarly production, Maulana Maududi accepted the invitation and moved to Hyderabad toward the end of 1932. This decision marked the beginning of a new phase in his life, the tranquility of Hyderabad. Its intellectually stimulating environment and the support of Darul Islam enabled him to give practical form to an aspiration that had long been taking shape within him, namely, to present the teachings of the Quran to the modern mind in a clear, reasoned, and revolutionary idiom. It was with this objective that he launched the first issue of the journal Tarjuman al-Quran in January 1932. The journal was not merely a periodical publication. It became the intellectual foundation of a movement that would, in time, exert a far-reaching influence upon modern Islamic revivalist thought at the global level. The editorship of Tarjuman al-Quran remained entirely in Maulana Maududi's hands. From its earliest issues, he presented Islam's political, social, and civilizational vision with such intellectual force and argumentative vigor that the journal soon became a major center of Muslim thought in the Indian subcontinent. In the first issue, writing as editor under the title Religion and Government, he stated, "Another name for religion is the establishment of the sovereignty of God, and Sharia refers to those laws that are necessary for the functioning of that government. Every religion contains this purpose within itself, and this is, in reality, the essential objective of every religious scripture. Even the Hindus continue to sing the praises of Ram Raj, yet the lofty ideal that may once have been contained within it has, to a great extent, faded from people's hearts. Ram Raj has come to be understood simply as Hindu rule. Christians, after their church prayers, supplicate, 'Heavenly Father, just as your rule exists in heaven, may it also come upon the earth.' I do not know precisely what they mean by this, but the apparent meaning of these words is that virtue should prevail and that whatever human beings do, inwardly and outwardly, should conform to the will of God. Muslims, whose very purpose in life was to live beneath the sovereignty of God, and whose lives and deaths were meant to be devoted to it, have also not remained wholly faithful to their position. They describe the rule of any person who happens to become a ruler and calls himself a Muslim as an Islamic government, as I have already stated. Another name for religion is the establishment of divine government. No adherent of any religion can truly deny this. Yet the greatest negligence and failure of the followers of every religion today is that they remain as distant from this great objective as the earth is from the heavens." He reinforced these conclusions through two further essays, which were later expanded and published as independent books, Tajdeed wa Ihya-e-Din, Renewal and Revival of Religion, and Quran Ki Char Bunyadi Istilahat, the four basic Quranic terms. From its very first issue until the period in which it continued under Maulana Maududi's editorship, Tarjuman al-Quran reveals no intellectual evolution, in the sense that he significantly altered the central ideas set forth in Al-Jihad fi al-Islam. His entire movement, his thought, and his life followed a single, uninterrupted trajectory. There were, of course, changes in strategy. One finds more elaborate responses to criticism, greater diversity and depth in the arguments advanced in support of his interpretation of religion, and increasingly systematic formulations of his intellectual position. Yet the ultimate purpose and destination remained unchanged. In his view, Islam essentially meant the establishment of God's sovereignty upon the earth. This, he held, was the purpose of every Muslim's life, and the sole mission of all prophets, from Adam to Muhammad, peace be upon him. Until the establishment of Jama'at-e-Islami, his pen remained committed to this objective. He wrote dozens of essays, yet the central axis of each remained the same. Islam had come for the establishment of divine sovereignty, and every Muslim ought to live and die for that cause. Once such a divine order had been established, Muslims were to rise for the purpose of extending the banner and predominance of Islam across the entire world. The establishment of Jamaat-e-Islami. Jamaat-e-Islami did not publish Tarjuman al-Quran on the basis of a political party or official state patronage. Rather, he was advancing an intellectual and practical movement. The resources required for this endeavor came from three principal sources. First, Darul Islam provided institutional support. It offered him employment, research facilities, and arrangements for publication. The initial expenses of the journal were also met through the institution's resources. This financial and editorial support enabled Tarjuman al-Quran to establish itself independently. Second, Maulana Maududi's growing reputation, the strength of his arguments, and the influence of his writings rapidly brought the journal a substantial readership. Within only a few issues, the number of annual subscribers increased sufficiently to establish a stable financial basis for the periodical. Third, he received financial assistance from several affluent individuals in Hyderabad, a state known for its considerable wealth and resources. Thus, the journey from Maulana Maududi's early journalistic career to the launch of Tarjuman al-Quran was not simply the story of an individual's success. It signified the beginning of a new intellectual movement centered upon a distinctive conception of Islam throughout India. Maulana Maududi employed Tarjuman al-Quran to propagate his distinctive understanding of Islam as an integrated, practical, and revolutionary way of life. Alongside his various articles, he also presented himself in a manner that suggested his preparedness to assume responsibility for the leadership of this movement. Jamaat-e-Islami was established on 26 August 1941. In the February issue of Tarjuman al-Quran, Maulana wrote of himself, "Our opinion regarding Islam is not the result of having been born in a Muslim household, nor does it arise from any inherited inclination in favor of Islam. I cannot speak for my colleagues, but as far as I am concerned, the form in which I encountered Islam in the Muslim society around me held no attraction for me. Once I developed the capacity for criticism and inquiry, the first thing I did was cast off the lifeless religiosity which I had inherited as a burden around my neck. Had Islam been merely the religion that was then found among Muslims, perhaps I too would have joined the ranks of the atheists today. I have no inclination towards racial or nationalist philosophies that would lead me to worship my forefathers merely for the preservation of a nation's existence. Yet what prevented me from accepting another collective ideology, and what made me a Muslim anew, was my study of the Quran and the life of Muhammad, peace be upon him. It acquainted me with the true values of humanity. In reality, therefore, I am a new Muslim. I accepted this faith only after careful examination and scrutiny. Once my heart and mind bore witness that there is no other path to human rectitude and salvation besides it. I invite not only non-Muslims, but Muslims themselves towards Islam. My purpose is not to preserve or expand this so-called Muslim society, which has itself moved far away from the path of Islam. Rather, my invitation is towards the elimination of the oppression and injustice that have spread throughout the world, towards the abolition of one human being's godhood over another, and towards the construction of a new world upon the pattern laid down by the Quran, a world in which the dignity and honor of human beings are protected, and in which freedom, equality, and justice prevail. Before the establishment of Jamaat-e-Islami, and by 1940, Maulana Maududi had written 2 major essays, which were later expanded and published in book form. In these writings, he sought to provide the scholarly and conceptual foundations of his distinctive intellectual project. These works were titled Tajdid wa Ihya-e-Din, Renewal and Revival of Religion, and Quran Ki Char Bunyadi Istilahat, the four basic Quranic terms. In the combined December 1940 to January 1941 issue of Tarjuman al-Quran, he wrote in Tajdid wa Ihya-e-Din, "Thus the ultimate purpose of the mission of the prophets, peace be upon them, has always been to establish the sovereignty of God and to implement the entire system of life, which they themselves brought from Him for mankind. For this reason, all prophets endeavored to bring about political revolution. Some were able only to prepare the ground, as in the case of Prophet Abraham. Some initiated revolutionary movements, but passed away before establishing the sovereignty of God, as in the case of Prophet Jesus. Others carried the movement to the stage of success, as did Prophet Moses, and the seal of the prophets, Muhammad, peace be upon him. In brief, when we examine the collective work of all the prophets, we find that its essential character consisted first in bringing about an intellectual and mental revolution among the general masses, then in forming from among those who accepted this teaching and training a strong and organized body, and striving to wrest power from the hands of Jahiliyyah. Thereafter, as new members enter the Islamic community through preaching and procreation, their intellectual and moral training must continue in accordance with the complete Islamic way of life." He further wrote, "The seal of the Prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, brought this entire task to completion within a period of 23 years. After him, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq and Umar al-Faruq, may Allah be pleased with them, were two leaders of such complete caliber that they continued the work of the Prophet, peace be upon him, with the same comprehensiveness. Thereafter, the reins of leadership passed to Uthman, may Allah be pleased with him. During the initial years, the general pattern established by the Prophet, peace be upon him, remained intact. However, on the one hand, the rapid expansion of the Islamic State made the task increasingly difficult, and on the other, Uthman, upon whom this great responsibility had fallen, did not possess all the qualities that had been granted to his illustrious predecessors. Consequently, Jahiliyyah found an opening through which it could penetrate the Islamic social order. He then argued that Muslim society had been led into decline by three successive forms of Jahiliyyah. First, pure Jahiliyyah, namely the replacement of the caliphate by monarchy. Then, polytheistic Jahiliyyah, represented by shirk and religious innovation. And finally, monastic Jahiliyyah, by which he meant Sufism. Accordingly, many individuals within the Muslim Ummah began working for its reform. He referred to these figures as mujaddids, or renewers of religion. At the same time, he maintained that the work of all these renewers had remained incomplete, because none of them had been a fully comprehensive or complete mujaddid. He then identified 9 characteristics of such a complete renewer. First, the renewer must accurately diagnose his environment and identify the particular areas in which corruption and decline have taken root. Second, he must formulate a practical program of reform. Third, he must recognize his own limitations and determine the capacities and abilities available to him. Fourth, he must strive to bring about an intellectual revolution by reforming people's ideas, beliefs, patterns of thought, and moral outlook. Fifth, he must work for practical reform in the conduct and organization of life. Sixth, he must understand the requirements of ijtihad fi al-din, independent reasoning in matters of religion. He must assess, from an Islamic perspective, the civilizational conditions of his age, the direction of social development, and the problems arising from it, and then offer appropriate solutions. Seventh, he must prepare an effective and well-directed program of defensive struggle. Eighth, he must work for the revival of the Islamic order by wresting the keys of authority from the hands of the 3 forms of Jahiliyyah and re-establishing Islamic government. Ninth, after attaining that stage, he must complete the task by securing the universal ascendancy of Islam throughout the world. With reference to the concept of Imam Mahdi found in the Hadith tradition, Maulana Maududi wrote of the complete renewer. The emergence of a great leader is also inevitable, a leader under whose comprehensive and forceful guidance this revolution will take place. I am astonished at the intelligence of those who are surprised at the possibility of such a leader appearing. When leaders of misguidance such as Lenin and Hitler can emerge in God's world, why should the emergence of a leader of guidance be considered improbable? On the basis of his study, Maulana Maududi examined in detail the work of 11 major renewers. These included Umar ibn Abd al-Aziz, the 4 great Imams of Islamic jurisprudence, Imam al-Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, Shah Wali Allah, Syed Ahmad Baralwi, and Shah Ismail Shahid. In his assessment, Umar bin Abdul Aziz came closest to fulfilling the ideal of a complete renewer. The others, he argued, achieved only partial success in meeting some of the 9 requirements. He also subjected their work to critical examination and concluded, "The first lesson to be drawn from the failure of this movement of Islamic renewal in the face of Western Jahiliyyah is that, for the renewal of religion, the revival of the religious sciences, and the restoration of the spirit of adherence to the Sharia alone are not sufficient. What is required is a comprehensive and all-embracing Islamic movement, one that extends its influence over every field of knowledge and thought, every branch of art and industry, and every sphere of life. One that employs every available power in the service of Islam." The second lesson is that the task of renewal now requires a new force of ijtihad. The degree of juristic insight found in the work of Shah Wali Allah, or in the work of earlier jurists and renewers of the Muslim community, is no longer sufficient to meet the demands of the present age. Guidance may certainly be derived from the Quran and the Sunnah for the task of renewing the Muslim community in this era. Yet, in order to derive that guidance and construct a practical path suited to contemporary circumstances, there is a need for an independent power of ijtihad, one that is not bound by the learning or methodology of any single jurist of the past, though it may benefit from all of them and disregard none of them. Thus, although writing in concise form, Maulana Maududi identified the principal milestones of the movement he envisaged and clarified its essential contours. Maulana Maududi was fully aware that, by equating Islam with the establishment of a political order, he was advancing an interpretation of religion that had not previously been articulated in these exact terms, or with this degree of certainty. He also understood that this new interpretation of Islam needed to be grounded in a firm scholarly framework. For this purpose, he wrote an essay entitled "The 4 Basic Quranic Terms." The 4 foundational terms examined in this work are Ilah, Rab, Ibadah, and Din. He published the essay in the May 1941 issue of his journal Tarjuman al-Quran. Before the establishment of Jamaat-e-Islami, he wrote, "Over the succeeding centuries, the original meanings of all these words, the meanings understood at the time of the Quran's revelation, gradually changed. Eventually, each term lost the breadth of its original meaning and became confined to highly restricted and often vague concepts. One reason for this was the decline of a genuine appreciation for classical Arabic. The other was that the people who emerged within Islamic society no longer retained the meanings of Ilah, Rab, Din, and Ibadah that had been current in the non-Muslim society at the time of the Quran's revelation. For these 2 reasons, later works of lexicography and Quranic exegesis increasingly began to explain many Quranic words, not according to their original lexical meanings, but according to the meanings later Muslims had come to understand from them. The meaning Maulana Maududi assigned to these terms may be summarized as follows. Ilah. For Maulana Maududi, Ilah does not carry only the limited meaning of the one worshipped. Rather, it signifies an absolute sovereign, disposer of affairs, and possessor of ultimate authority. In other words, the being whom a person regards as the highest authority, whom he fears above all others, in whom he places ultimate trust, and whom he obeys without reservation. Such a being is, in effect, his Ilah. Thus, Ilah is the supreme ruler, the possessor of complete authority, and the sole center of obedience and servitude. In common usage, the term is generally understood simply as an object of worship, while its wider implications are treated as secondary to that primary meaning. Maulana Maududi, however, extended the term to include sovereignty, ultimate authority, obedience, and complete allegiance. Rabb, creator, sustainer, and lawgiver. The term Rabb, in Maulana Maududi's interpretation, does not simply mean the one who nurtures. It refers to the being who creates, sustains, regulates, gives law, and governs the order of the universe. To acknowledge Allah as Rabb, therefore, requires human beings to accept His guidance in every sphere of life. In summary, Allah is the creator, the sustainer, the lawgiver, and the sovereign administrator of the entire cosmos. A din, a complete order of life. For Maulana Maududi, din is not merely a collection of rituals and acts of worship. It is a complete system of life. In his understanding, din refers to the organized order of sovereignty, authority, law, and obedience that governs both the collective and individual dimensions of human existence. Who is sovereign? Whose law will prevail? Whom will people obey? Taken together, these questions define din. Ibadah, total submission and obedience. Maulana Maududi did not restrict ibadah to prayer, fasting, prostration, and other ritual acts. In his view, its essential meaning is complete servitude before Allah, humility, surrender, obedience, and submission to His law. It entails accepting Allah's authority to legislate, following His guidance in every aspect of life, and bringing one's heart, mind, and conduct entirely under His command. According to Maulana Maududi, the whole structure of Islam rests upon these four foundations. Allah is Ilah. He is the supreme sovereign. Allah is Rabb. He is the lawgiver and sustainer. Human beings are required to make His din their complete system of life. To live according to that system is the true meaning of ibadah. Thus, Islam may be understood as the combination of Allah's sovereignty, Allah's law, obedience to Allah, and the complete servitude of human beings before Him. Having established these intellectual and theoretical foundations, Maulana Maududi laid the foundation of Jamaat-e-Islami in August 1941. He deserves recognition for the fact that he neither concealed his ideas nor adopted an apologetic posture in presenting them. He was fully conscious that his interpretation of religion was new, yet he explained each interpretation and every intended meaning with exceptional clarity and detail. Pathankot and Lahore, Dar al-Salam, and the early activities of Jamaat-e-Islami. In the late 1930s, in the verdant valleys of Shakargarh near Pathankot, Chaudhry Niaz Ali Khan, a retired government officer of deep religious inclination, conceived the idea of establishing a major center for Islamic scholarship and research. Seeking guidance for this project, he approached Allama Muhammad Iqbal. Iqbal not only appreciated the proposal, but also directed him towards a personality capable of translating this vision into reality. It was at this point that Allama Iqbal suggested the name of Syed Abul Maududi, a young but deeply perceptive thinker, whose writings had already earned recognition in the scholarly circles of the subcontinent. Accordingly, with Iqbal's endorsement and Maulana Maududi's consent, the land for Dar al-Salam near Pathankot was placed under his charge in 1938, so that he might establish there a center for the renewal and reconstruction of Islamic thought. Maulana Maududi created in this setting a quiet world of scholarship removed from the noise of political agitation. When the need arose to establish Jamaat-e-Islami in August 1941, its first gathering was held in Lahore, while Pathankot continued to serve primarily as a center for scholarly and research-oriented work. There were two principal reasons for holding the founding meeting in Lahore. First, Chaudhry Niaz Ali Khan had dedicated the Pathankot property for the establishment of an institution, not for the formation of a political organization. Moreover, he was politically aligned with the Muslim League and did not agree with Maulana Maududi's political position. For this reason, Maulana Maududi, being a man of principle, did not consider it appropriate to begin activities at Dar al-Salam that his benefactor and patron might have disapproved of. Second, Pathankot was a remote location and was not easily accessible. The founding meeting of Jamaat-e-Islami was therefore held in Lahore, a vibrant and well-connected city. The establishment of Jamaat-e-Islami. At the founding gathering of Jamaat-e-Islami on 26 August 1941, approximately 75 selected individuals from across India took part. They were by no means ordinary participants. Some were eminent scholars of Islam, while others were highly educated intellectuals. Among the earliest participants were Maulana Amin Ahsan Islahi, Maulana Abdur Rahim Ashraf, Sayyid Nazir Niazi, Chaudhry Ghulam Muhammad, Malik Barkat Ali, Maulana Zafar Ahmad Ansari, Sheikh Muhammad Aslam, and Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. They placed complete trust in Maulana Maududi's scholarly depth and organizational insight, regarding him as the natural guide of the movement for the establishment of divine sovereignty. Contemporary newspapers, especially Zamindar, Medina, and Ahsan, describe the movement as a significant development in the religious and political consciousness of Muslims. Certain influential circles, meanwhile, viewed it as an ideological force that could eventually shape state affairs and political direction. Thus, Jamaat-e-Islami emerged not merely as an organizational initiative, but as the organized, practical expression of Maulana Maududi's thought, his literary struggle, and his vision for the intellectual reconstruction of Muslim society. It was a moment that left enduring effects upon the intellectual, social, and political history of the subcontinent, and, after partition, upon Pakistan as well. The Jamaat-e-Islami, founded by Maulana Maududi, was, in many respects, a distinctive organization within India. It was political in the sense that the attainment of authority was among its foremost objectives and central ideals. Yet, it kept itself apart from every form of electoral contest. It was revolutionary in character, though not in the sense that it sought revolution through force, coercion, or unlawful means. It regarded the British government, along with the governments of the wider world, as un-Islamic and morally deficient. In its view, no existing government fully fulfilled the requirements of an Islamic order. Despite this, the Jamaat did not launch a campaign of civil disobedience against British rule or against the laws enacted by it. Rather, it observed the existing laws relating to public order, peace, and discipline. Its members, however, could not serve in state institutions or occupations prohibited by the Sharia, for example, employment in banking. Following what it understood to be the method of prophets and messengers, the Jamaat adopted the policy of intellectual formation and character building, while remaining within the framework of prevailing law. Its strategy was clear. First, the formation of character, then, the formation of government. The Jamaat's process of membership was also highly distinctive. No non-Muslim could become a member. A Muslim who wished to join had to pass through a specific organizational process. Initially, he became a mutafiq, an associate who agreed with the Jamaat's principles. Thereafter, he became a worker, participated in its activities, and familiarized himself with its constitution, objectives, and method of work. After serving for a designated period, he could apply for full membership. The Amir of the Jamaat, Maulana Abul Ala Maududi, at that time, would evaluate the applicant's performance, commitment to the mission of the organization, moral conduct, and observance of religious obligations. Only after being satisfied in these matters would he approve or reject the application for membership. Likewise, if serious questions arose concerning a member's conduct, moral character, or fulfillment of Islamic responsibilities, and if that person was found at fault, Maulana Maududi, as Amir, possessed the authority to expel him from the Jamaat. Any member who came to disagree with the organization was free to resign. Accordingly, by the time of Pakistan's establishment, the number of Jamaat-e-Islami members stood at approximately 550. In 1947, the membership of 83 individuals was also suspended. The political situation and Maulana Maududi. This was a period in which the world was passing through the turbulence of the Second World War. Britain and its allies were rapidly retreating before the alliance of Germany and Japan. Meanwhile, the Muslim League had evolved beyond the status of a social organization and had assumed the character of a political party. The earlier idealism of Hindu-Muslim cooperation between the Congress and the Muslim League had come to an end. The Muslim League had now clearly identified the partition of India and the creation of Pakistan as its political objective. Unlike the Congress, it therefore supported the British war effort, in the expectation that such support would lead the British to view its demand for Pakistan with greater sympathy. The Lahore Resolution of March 23, 1940, had already been passed, and the Muslim League claimed that the demand for Pakistan represented the aspirations of all Muslims of the subcontinent. The Congress, however, maintained that the Muslim League possessed no genuine popular standing. It asserted that people of every class and religious community in India would, under Congress leadership, compel the British to leave the country at the earliest possible moment. Therefore, it argued, Muslims should support the Congress rather than strengthen British hands by raising the issue of partition. Among political leaders, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's authority within the Muslim League was steadily growing. The modern collective consciousness of Indian Muslims, largely shaped by the intellectual environment of Aligarh Muslim University, had aligned itself with the Muslim League. The poetry of Allama Muhammad Iqbal provided this narrative with considerable emotional force. The essence of this narrative was that Pakistan would mark the beginning of the political renaissance of Muslims. Within such a state, Muslims would be able to construct an ideal society grounded in their civilization, religion, and intellectual tradition. The principal argument for the partition of India was that Muslims would face grave danger from the Hindu majority in a united India. Muslim League leaders acknowledged that Hindus and Muslims had lived together peacefully for centuries. Yet they argued, Muslims had historically occupied the position of rulers and had protected the rights of non-Muslims. Under democratic principles, however, the Hindu majority would become politically dominant, and the Muslim League did not trust that majority to safeguard Muslim interests. According to its narrative, the Muslim League had become profoundly disillusioned by the allegedly anti-Muslim conduct of Congress provincial ministries after 1935. It was convinced that Muslims would experience deep insecurity under Hindu majority rule in a united India. Therefore, it sought the partition of the subcontinent so that, after the departure of the British, the two independent states could live peacefully in accordance with their respective ideals. Now, on the other side stood Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Earlier in his life, he had held, to some extent, a conception of religion and politics similar to that later articulated by Maulana Maududi. However, the failure of the Khilafat movement deeply affected his intellectual outlook. In particular, the deaths of thousands of Muslims during the Hijrat movement towards Afghanistan profoundly shook him. He began to reconsider the idea of religious identity as the foundation of nationhood in the light of changing historical circumstances. After observing the failure of the Khilafat movement, as well as developments in Turkey and the wider Middle East, he came to regard this conception as inconsistent with political reality. He openly rejected it and described his support for the fatwas encouraging migration during the Hijrat movement as the gravest political and religious mistake of his life. By 1941, Maulana Azad had reached the conclusion that the world was moving beyond the era of religious states and entering the era of nation-states. With striking foresight, he believed that the partition of India would lead to devastation, disappointment, and failure for Muslims in both Pakistan and India. In his view, this partition would prove destructive for the Muslims of the subcontinent in both religious and worldly terms. He therefore devoted his abilities to supporting the Congress in the hope that the subcontinent might remain undivided and India might emerge as a united political community comparable in structure to the United States as a union of constituent states. Maulana Azad did not agree with Maulana Maududi's interpretation that the political supremacy of Islam throughout the world was a religious requirement. One major reason for his opposition to the demand for Pakistan was his belief that partition on the basis of religion would create new territorial boundaries. These boundaries, he feared, would generate hostility, rivalry, and enmity among Hindus, Muslims, and other communities. Such divisions would inevitably obstruct the communication of Islam's message and hinder efforts to bring non-Muslim peoples closer. In his view, the objectives pursued by Muslims in Pakistan would create countless difficulties for Muslims who remained in India. Indian Muslims, he feared, would never be able fully to establish themselves as loyal and well-wishing citizens of their homeland. Pakistan, meanwhile, because of its inherent structural problems, would be unable to become a successful state. It would remain beset by political, economic, social, religious, and ideological difficulties. The Deobandi scholars had also become divided into two camps. Maulana Hussain Ahmad Madani opposed partition and saw the collective and national welfare of Muslims in a united India. In this regard, he agreed with Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. By contrast, Maulana Shabir Ahmad Usmani and Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanawi supported the Muslim League. Among scholars associated with the Barelwi school of thought, Pir Jamaat Ali Shah also supported the Muslim League. Amid this religious and political struggle, when the atmosphere of the subcontinent resounded with slogans of united nationalism and freedom, the voice of Maulana Syed Abul Maududi was distinctly different. He articulated an entirely different conception of nationhood. For him, Muslim national identity transcended the criteria of territory, race, and geography. In 1940 and 1941, Maulana Maududi wrote a series of articles which were later published in book form under the title Mas'ala-e-Qawmiyat, the problem of nationalism. In his view, the basis of nationhood was not modern territorial or secular principles. Rather, it rested upon the shared bonds of faith, belief, and servitude to God. Maulana Maududi wrote, "In Islam, the criterion of nationhood is religion, not homeland." According to Maulana Maududi, all those who had accepted servitude to Allah belonged to one ummah, one nation, regardless of the region of the world in which they lived. He wrote, "The community that has accepted servitude to Allah constitutes one nation, even if it is scattered throughout different parts of the world." This conception was entirely different from the dominant political discourse of the time, in which nationhood was generally defined through territory, language, majority, and minority status, and inherited religious affiliation. Maulana Maududi warned that if Muslims confined their nationhood merely to political geography, their religious and communal unity would disintegrate, and their existence would be reduced to that of a purely political group. Maulana Maududi described the Muslim League's narrative as hypocritical. He argued that it possessed neither the leadership, the resources, nor the ideological foundation required to construct the Pakistan it promised to the Muslims of the subcontinent. For this reason, he instructed his followers and the small number of Jamaat-e-Islami workers to remain entirely detached from the prevailing political agitation. From the establishment of Jamaat-e-Islami until the partition of India, he continued to persuade both Muslims and non-Muslims of the subcontinent of his position. Even regarding the critically important elections of 1946, he wrote in response to a question, "You must clearly understand our position concerning voting and elections. Whatever importance the present or future elections may possess, and whatever consequences they may have for our community and country, it is impossible for us, as a principled organization, to sacrifice the principles in which we believe merely for the sake of temporary expediency. Our struggle against the existing system rests precisely upon the fact that it is founded upon the sovereignty of the people. It grants the parliament or assembly elected by the people the unconditional right to legislate, recognizing no higher authority above it. In contrast, our belief is that the fundamental requirement of Tawheed is that sovereignty belongs not to the people, but to God. The final authority must be recognized as God's book, and whatever legislation is undertaken must remain subject to divine revelation rather than independent of it. In accordance with its decision, Jamaat-e-Islami remained neutral. The Muslim League's near-total success in the elections effectively settled the question that the Muslims of the subcontinent supported the demand for Pakistan. By this stage, the general political atmosphere had become favorable to the establishment of Pakistan. Taking the emerging circumstances into account, Maulana Maududi then announced the future course of action for his Jamaat. Maulana Maududi's new course of action in the wake of the decision to partition India. At this juncture, Maulana Maududi once again reaffirmed his Jamaat's commitment to its central objective, the establishment of divine sovereignty. Writing in Tarjuman al-Quran, he declared, "Our aspiration is that Jamaat-e-Islami may become the community that fulfills this need of the age, the establishment of the sovereignty of God. Yet this task requires far more than aspiration. It requires sincerity of intention, intellectual alertness, and sound judgment. It demands strenuous effort, self-sacrifice, and dedication. It requires firm resolve, high courage, and purity of heart. Whatever community rises with these qualities to establish justice and bear witness before mankind will prove to be the savior of India. In the end, not only will the reins of this country come into its hands, but the path toward the leadership of the world will also be opened for it." Direct Action Day and the communal riots. Following the Muslim League's victory in the elections, the decision to establish Pakistan should, in principle, have been settled. However, in an effort to retain control over the political process, the British government announced the Cabinet Mission Plan. The initiative ultimately failed to produce a resolution. After disagreements over the Cabinet Mission Plan and certain statements by Congress leaders, the Muslim League had become increasingly convinced that Muslim political rights would not remain secure under a system dominated by majoritarian politics. Consequently, Muhammad Ali Jinnah called for Direct Action Day on August 16, 1946. Jinnah presented the call as a strategy of organized political protest and pressure, rather than an invitation to violent confrontation. At this critical moment, however, the senior Congress leader, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, warned the Muslim League in unequivocal terms that, in such tense circumstances, the movement would not remain merely a political demonstration. He cautioned that this protest may slip beyond the control of political leadership and turn into communal bloodshed driven by popular passions. He further warned that once the door to violence had been opened, it would no longer be possible for political leaders to close it. Events in Calcutta unfolded precisely in accordance with Maulana Azad's fears. The protest developed into intense violence and large-scale killing. The flames of communal conflict then spread to Noakhali, Bihar, and other regions in the form of retaliatory and revenge-based riots. Thus, the crisis did not remain confined to one city or one day. It developed into a continuing cycle of reaction and reprisal, which the British government failed to contain effectively. This was the historical turning point at which the principal leaders and stakeholders of the subcontinent came to regard partition as the only practical solution. Even at that moment, however, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad maintained that this was only the beginning. He warned that, if partition took place, the violence would spread further and its consequences would endure for generations. Jamaat-e-Islami's conduct during the riots. During the riots, the conduct of Jamaat-e-Islami under Maulana Maududi's leadership was widely regarded as commendable. From its humblest workers to its most senior leaders, the Jamaat claimed to stand solely with the oppressed. Transcending religious prejudice, it openly condemned Muslims wherever they were at fault. Where non-Muslim rioters committed acts of oppression, the Jamaat extended assistance to Muslim victims. Yet it did not join any party in acts of lawlessness or communal violence. This position provoked strong resentment among sections of Muslim League supporters, who regarded it as contrary to religious honor and communal solidarity. At an annual Jamaat-e-Islami gathering in Madras, for example, individuals entered the pavilion under the pretext of attending the event and caused disorder. They seized the food prepared for the participants, removed the Jamaat's flags, and replaced them with Muslim League flags. Maulana Maududi returned without delivering his address. The local Muslim League leadership later apologized and stated that they would attend the gathering properly in order to hear Maulana Maududi's speech. The organizers accepted this assurance and allowed them to participate in the next session. They did attend, but some among them were reportedly intoxicated. Before Maulana Maududi could deliver his speech, they repeated the same disruptive conduct. Although the organizers had police protection available to them, Maulana Maududi sent instructions that the police should not intervene in any manner. He directed that the disruptive elements be restrained solely through courteous conduct and patience. As a result, the gathering became severely disturbed and disorganized. Nevertheless, the participants of the Jamaat preserved the meeting through patience alone, and the event was eventually concluded peacefully. When the incident was reported in the press, the Muslim League leadership did not issue an apology. Instead, it sent Maulana Maududi a letter stating that it would apologize only if he expelled the relevant local leaders from the Jamaat. Maulana Maududi, naturally, refused to accept this unreasonable demand. A detailed account of the incident was published in the June 1947 issue of Tarjuman al-Quran. In marked contrast, Mahatma Gandhi attended a local Jamaat gathering as a guest at the organization's invitation. At the event, he listened to a speech by Maulana Amin Ahsan Islahi, the deputy Amir of Jamaat-e-Islami. He thanked the organizers, obtained Jamaat literature, and promised to study it. This incident drew intense criticism from Muslim League newspapers. In particular, Nawa-e-Waqt, in a strongly worded editorial, described the Jamaat as the B team of the Congress. Mian Tufail Muhammad, the Secretary General of the Jamaat, clarified that its public gatherings were open to both Muslims and non-Muslims. He stated that invitations had been extended to leaders of both the Congress and the Muslim League. No Muslim League leader attended, whereas Gandhi happened to be in the city at the time and accepted the invitation. The Jamaat, he explained, was grateful for his attendance. After the riots. Under Maulana Maududi's resolute leadership, Jamaat-e-Islami continued its distinctive work of ideological and religious propagation, remaining detached from the surrounding political upheaval. Its activities were limited to a small number of journals, local teaching circles, public gatherings, and the publication and distribution of literature on a limited scale. Yet, without concern for immediate popularity, Maulana Maududi continued to build a team of members and workers who were expected to meet exacting standards of piety, moral conduct, religious learning, and commitment. A few months before the establishment of Pakistan, at the final General Assembly held in United India, Maulana Maududi announced the future course of action for both India and Pakistan. In the aftermath of the riots, when India had become a furnace of Hindu-Muslim hostility, he announced that one part of Jamaat-e-Islami would remain in India while another part would relocate to Pakistan. Even in those profoundly bitter circumstances, he outlined the Jamaat's approach towards the non-Muslims of India. It was a striking declaration, one that reflected his assessment of Indian society, prevailing political conditions, and the social dynamics of the time. Explaining his position in his address, he stated, "I have often told you that the possibility of bringing about an Islamic revolution in Muslim-majority regions is almost equal to the possibility of bringing it about in non-Muslim majority regions as well." Many people consider this statement to be the dream of a man lost in imagination. Some believe that it is perhaps some subtle point of mysticism which lies beyond their understanding. They see clearly that the non-Muslim majority stands before Muslims as a strong, united, and organized bloc. They see no weakness or opening within it through which it might break apart. The intoxication of nationalism has completely overtaken it. The entire machinery of government in Hindu India has now come firmly into its hands, and whatever remains to be secured will soon be fully achieved. Looking at the situation, they cannot understand from where, or by what path, the possibility of an Islamic revolution might emerge here. Maulana Maududi's assessment of India's future. Maulana Maududi then offered a detailed assessment of India's future. He predicted that, following independence, a Congress-led government would subject the public to widespread exploitation. In time, this, he believed, would create an opportunity for advocates of communism to promise the people prosperity and social justice. Yet he also predicted that the communist system would fail severely. The damage inflicted upon India by such a communist revolution, he argued, would destroy even the limited spiritual and moral values that had survived centuries of decline. India, in his view, would ultimately become an entirely materialistic society. At that stage, he maintained, India could only be saved by a group that combined authentic spiritual and moral values with a commitment to collective justice and genuine democracy. The people, he believed, would then realize that neither the Congress nor communism possessed a solution to their problems. Only Islam, he argued, could offer such an alternative and persuade India's majority that Islam itself could become their ultimate destination. He concluded with the following prediction. The question is whether Muslims can present this third path or not. If they can present it, and if the name of this third path is Islam, then I say with confidence that, in the conditions likely to prevail in the future India, Islam has at least a 60% chance of success. It would be the greatest misfortune and the gravest incompetence on the part of Muslims if they possess a complete and sound system such as Islam, yet fail to rise with it and leave the entire field open for communism. Maulana Maududi then outlined a program through which Muslims, even in a Hindu-majority India, might win public confidence, attract people to Islam on a broad scale, and eventually exercise decisive influence over the political order. Withdrawal from sectarian political demands. The first principle, in his view, was that Muslims should renounce all forms of sectional political demands. In his words, it is absolutely necessary that Muslims completely alter their method of conduct. The question of proportional representation in assemblies, the struggle surrounding elections, the contest for government employment, and the clamor for other communal rights and demands will be both futile and harmful in the coming age. Futile because those into whose hands the government of India is now passing have already decided to eliminate the separate political identity of Muslims by establishing the principle of majority rule in joint electorates and public employment. There is no way to prevent their decision from being implemented. They will be harmful because the more Muslims insist upon these rights, the more they will inflame Hindu communal sentiment. Should Muslims seek Pakistan's support in redressing their grievances, this would become a source of international complications and conflict. Therefore, we must cultivate public opinion on a broad scale among Muslims so that, as a community, they may withdraw their interest from the government and its system. Through their conduct, they must reassure Hindu nationalism that no other political force or national identity exists in the field to contend with it. This alone is the way to defeat the extraordinary prejudice that has arisen within the non-Muslim majority against Islam. It is also the means through which the fear of non-Muslims, that Muslims are their national enemies, may be removed. Moral reform and persuasive witness. The second principle was that Muslims should be reformed through religious instruction and moral cultivation, to such an extent that their conduct itself would become attractive to non-Muslims. In this way, non-Muslims would encounter Islam not merely in books or on paper, but as a visible and living reality. He explained, it is possible that the lower classes among the Hindus may be deeply affected by this. If we achieve even partial success in this work of reform, and if we also create a general awareness of Islam among Muslims and awaken within them the spirit that, in every encounter with non-Muslims throughout daily life, they should present Islam appropriately, according to the circumstances, then the pace of Islamic doubt may become so rapid that no other movement in India will be able to compete with it. There are approximately 40 to 50 million Muslims in India. Even if 1/20th of this number came to know Islam and began its propagation, the number of Islamic preachers would be between 2 and 2.5 million. Is there any other movement that possesses such a body of preachers? Muslims are intermingled with non-Muslims throughout India, like the ingredients of a mixed dish. In every sphere of life, at every place, and at every moment, they have opportunities to communicate their ideas to others and to influence them through their conduct. Does any other movement possess such opportunities? If even some degree of reform is achieved in accordance with our objective, Muslims can become a complete refuge for all those who have been rendered socially inferior, or who have been distressed by other evils of the Jahili social and civilizational order. Reforming the intellectual and journalistic discourse. For the third measure, he argued that Muslim journalists and writers should completely transform the prevailing tendency of Muslim political discourse. He proposed that writers of high caliber should establish newspapers in English, Urdu, and other Indian languages. Instead of raising constant demands for communal rights, protesting against alleged inequities in public employment, or lamenting Hindu dominance within state institutions, these newspapers should offer a principled critique of the prevailing political and social order. They should expose its deficiencies in detail, present a superior system of life, and prepare public opinion to accept it. Translating Islamic literature into India's languages. The fourth task, in his view, was to translate essential Islamic literature into all the languages of India. He therefore proposed that Muslims should cease relying upon only a limited number of languages and should work towards making Islamic literature available throughout the country in its diverse linguistic traditions. This highly significant address was delivered at the same annual gathering in Madras in April 1947, the gathering which Muslim League supporters had attempted to disrupt. Its full report was published in the June issue of Tarjuman al-Quran. In the same issue, an advertisement appeared under the title, "The Future Program of the Islamic Movement in Pakistan," by Maulana Abul Allah Maududi. The advertisement stated, "This pamphlet informs the members of Jamaat-e-Islami and those who share its views about the work that must be undertaken and the manner in which it must be undertaken in order to transform Pakistan's future government into a purely Islamic government. If the leaders are genuinely prepared to establish an Islamic order in accordance with the promises they made to Muslims, how shall we serve that order? And if, contrary to their promises, they establish a non-Islamic government for Muslims, what will be our revolutionary program for transforming it into an Islamic government?" Before this writing could appear in print, however, India was once again plunged into an emergency situation. With the announcement of Pakistan's creation, the cycle of communal violence began, precisely as Maulana Abul Kalam Azad had feared. At this point, Maulana Maududi decided to migrate to Pakistan. It became necessary to transfer the central office of Jamaat-e-Islami from Pathankot to Lahore, passing through circumstances of immense hardship and danger. Maulana Maududi arrived in Pakistan with a firm resolve to bring the unfinished mission of establishing divine sovereignty to completion there. His journey was now to begin anew, under new circumstances, amid new events, and in the face of new challenges. Because of the length and historical importance of this next phase, it will be narrated in the second and final part of this documentary.